I had on one or two occasions. Women will feign concern and then stop listening the moment I open up. Like, what was the point of nagging and asking me, "What's the matter?" I was 22 or 23 then. Learned my lesson about who I should open up to. It was a rude awakening on how harsh it is to be a man in today's society. Story 1. Yes, my mom has done it a few times. An ex of mine did it a couple of times. I had female teachers on more than one occasion do it. Though it was never mocking, it was always some variation of the phrase "man up." I was a child most of the times these things happened. Not with the ex. Story 2. 45 years of life have taught me that being open with my feelings is much more attractive than keeping them hidden. It never goes well. Either she invalidates those feelings or tries to, because the feeling is the feeling and doesn't change, or she uses it as ammunition for a later fight well after you've forgotten you mentioned it. You know who I open up to and don't get issues from it? Other men. Story 3. I usually got the "that's not a real problem" or "you shouldn't think like that," as if my problems were non-existent or not worth solving. Granted, I've not opened up many times in the first place due to the problems afterward. Story 4. Oh yes, the last time was 2 days ago. I got groped and harassed at a funeral, and the women in my life are insisting that it doesn't matter because she didn't mean it like that. If it was a man her age and a woman my age, they would not have said that. Story 5. To be honest, I've opened up a few times, and all I've ever really gotten out of it is, "You should go to therapy." And then the conversation ends there. I've been in and out of counseling. I absolutely recognize and appreciate its positive effects. And I definitely don't think I'm suicidal or anything. But it's happened enough times and with enough people that I think people just don't want to deal with me outside of the question itself. Story 6. Yeah, and that's why a lot of people just hold things in and eventually explode, because it feels like you can't express anything but fake toxic positivity. It's crazy that the people who thrive the most in this world are the least empathetic and just do things for show. Story 7. That happened all the time with my ex-wife. It normally ended one of several ways. She would get upset with me, and then I would have to console her, and afterwards she'd get mad at me for making her upset. Or she would diminish my problem and make it clear she has a much harder life. Oftentimes, she would start a fight a day after I opened up to her. Other times she would just shut me down and say, "I'm not your therapist," while she always demanded I give her unconditional support when she was down. Story 8. Most of the time, not a single person wished me a happy Father's Day this year. I did get a card a couple of days later, literally thrown at me by my 11-year-old daughter. I was humiliated and deeply hurt by this and have been in a bit of a depression lately, I think triggered by this. But there is no way I'll ever say a word about it to my wife. I know if I do, I will be mocked, vilified, and she'll find some way to place the blame on me. Was it really so hard to just say Happy Father's Day? I don't even care about a gift or a card. I just want to be acknowledged. The bar is so low for me, and I know if I did similar to my wife on Mother's Day, we might be getting a divorce. Story 9. I've had it turn into suddenly having to comfort them about it more often than I've been immediately shamed for it. I'll still be open about the minor worries or day-to-day things that are stressful because a good partner is going to want to help me with those things. But I'm not going to risk talking about insecurities. Those are mine to deal with and handle. Story 10. Yes, 100% of the women I have dated have done this at least once. In my opinion, there is only enough oxygen in each relationship for one person's emotions. Women claim all of that oxygen most of the time. Story 11. I once opened up to a female friend, my best friend at the time, about a traumatic event that happened in my past. I had a full breakdown in her car. At the time, she was super sympathetic. This was the first time I had ever told anyone what had happened, and she swore it to secrecy. A few days later, she stopped talking to me, and I had to go through her boyfriend, another close friend of mine, to see why. It turns out she didn't believe me and thought I was making it up for attention, and she told multiple people. I had never been so mad at someone before and still haven't. My trust issues still haven't been fully resolved from that. Story 12. Yes, I have, and this is why I have trust issues. You'll see why in my previous comments. But long story short, I had a female friend and colleague who noticed I wasn't right and asked what was up. I told her. A week later, she had written to Human Resources complaining that I was harassing her. She had no evidence but was the victim. I ended up resigning rather than being sacked. She was sitting in my living room 5 days before I was suspended, offering to look after my little girl. She admitted to other colleagues that she didn't mean it to go that far, just wanted me to notice her more. Forget you, Helen. Story 13. I opened up to my ex about the abuse I was experiencing at home and the sexual assault I endured from a relative. She laughed when I told her about the beatings from my father and dismissed the sexual assault, saying it didn't matter because I'm a guy. I wish I could say I left her then, but I didn't. She eventually cheated on me and turned our social circle against me. Story 14. Yes, and after being burned enough times, I stopped taking the bait. Also, it's good to have a trivial backup excuse that can be solved in 15 minutes, ready in case they press for an answer. You can't say nothing forever, so you have to have your own bait ready. Story 15. On the street while visiting my hometown, I came across the person who molested me as a child. That person was my school cab driver, and it went on for a while. He tried to make small talk, but I said I was busy and got away from him. Trauma came flooding back, and I told my ex. She said I should punish him, and now that I'm bigger than him, I should beat him up. I asked her if she could just let me cry, and she lectured me on how I should be a man and punish him for being a creep instead of whining to her. Story 16. Who hasn't laughed out loud? This usually happens when the person giving you the negative feeling is her. Women love to hear men's problems as long as they aren't the problem. They tend to get defensive when they are the issue. Story 17. Yes, buy a partner. Or use it against me in a fight later on. Really made me hesitant to open up in the future. However, some female friends actually care and have no judgment. Cherish those friendships because a female perspective is helpful. Story 18. Bruh. The worst is when they say something like, man up or be a man. Just because I have a negative emotion about something that deserves a negative emotional reaction doesn't make me less of a man. Furthermore, I'm not going to be lectured on being a man by a woman, especially one who doesn't even have a good male role model. Story 19. Mockery might have happened, but I do not remember. Shaming has happened from just about every woman who was ever any kind of close to me, at one time or another, except my still living grandmother who is too old for that. It is usually meant well, which does not help much. Story 20. I have never found any benefit to myself from telling a woman my feelings. Whatever I said was either brushed off as unimportant, interpreted in a way that had me consoling her, or was later thrown back in my face. There's only one reliable answer to what's wrong. Nothing, I'm fine. Story 21. Yes, I've experienced this a few times. Not many because I'm not a slow learner. In my opinion, the only woman a man may be able to open up with is a sister, preferably an older sister. That's been the only time I didn't regret it, I think because she always thought of me as the baby brother even when I was 50. Story 22. They will make you open up, make it their problem, dictate how you are supposed to feel, and find some way to offload it somewhere else and avoid it. Meanwhile, men need to be their emotional rock and support them. Men learn to keep that stuff to themselves. And women have the nerve to say they are more emotionally intelligent than men. Story 23. Women cannot help you with any of your problems. They are clueless about men's lives and way of thinking. Men can help women because all they want is to have someone listen to their complaints. Men want actual solutions. Women can neither provide solutions nor want to hear that there is a solution. They will see you as weak, and that will probably harm the relationship in the long run. Story 24. I read somewhere that women will say they want a man to express his emotions and cry in front of them, right up until the day that it actually happens. Then they will look at you like you are a hamster. This resonated with me because it reflects my personal experience. Crying in front of your significant other is a mistake. If you cannot handle it, you will pay for it later. Story 25. In 2012, I was physically attacked by a female family member. I risked opening up to a relatively recent female friend I had made at the time. She opened up her home to me, sheltered me for 6 months, and helped me work through the trauma of the event. I was blown away by her compassion and her willingness to shelter me in a time of great vulnerability. And it was a tiny studio apartment. She was risking a lot by letting me share that space with her. My grandfather passed away during that time, and she was there for me too. And it wasn't one way. She shared a lot of her anxieties about her current career path, and I did as much as I could to boost her confidence. We just tried to be there for each other as much as possible. I won't lie and say I didn't develop feelings. Who wouldn't after being shown such incredible kindness? But there was no way I was going to betray that trust or make her feel unsafe, and she didn't give me many signs that she was interested in me that way, so I kept them to myself. We're still connected to this day, and I'll never forget what she did for me. She went on to become really famous and successful, and I think she deserves every bit of her prosperity. Some other stories. Another roommate in 2017 helped me work through the grief of losing a big community that I had been a part of for a really long time. Her patience helped me heal and move forward. My girlfriend of 7 years has been a source of constant emotional support ever since we started dating. I've told her my deepest, darkest secrets and my greatest shames, and she never judges me for my weaknesses or tries to exploit them. However, she does point out when my mentality might be unhealthy and tries to help me keep my priorities straight and my motivations healthy. My current roommate has been helping me deal with my post-pandemic loneliness, getting me out of the house, introducing me to her friends, and giving me tips on being forward and confident, as well as how to avoid turning people off. Her help is limited because she's more invested in me pushing myself than leaning on her, but overall, it's been a huge help. Story 26. Yes, I have, and it feels pretty bad. I also have several women friends who genuinely listen and offer helpful advice and what feels like heartfelt sympathy. Story 27. In the past, I was at work with a coworker. I thought I was on good terms with her when I was eating during lunch and received a call that a close relative had passed away. It took me a moment to come to terms with it. She asked what was wrong, and just saying the words broke me and made it feel like only then it was real. She comforted me initially and said she would tell the manager what happened if I needed time or wanted to go home. I opted to go home so I could be with my family. I came back to work the next day, and another colleague told me she had mocked how I looked while crying and that it was such a gross thing to see a grown man cry. Thankfully, she was the only one out of everyone I worked with who said this. No one joined in, and she was taken to human resources that same day. We had a good working relationship before that with banter and would eat lunch together chatting. I had convinced myself we were friends. Thankfully, I have better people in my life now who have time and again showed nothing but tremendous support and empathy. But that's after many years of not trusting another woman with my emotional well-being. Story 28. It is not the fact that women do this regularly that bothers me, or the fact that men need to be more self-aware and cautious with whom or how they share personal emotions. It is the fact that it is such a normalized occurrence for it to be argued over by women and ridiculed. Sadly, one would hope it should not have to be this way, but when you have a social phenomenon that is repeated by thousands of guys, all complete strangers to one another, then it's a definitive behavioral issue that I would argue is toxic, and women need to be more accountable for understanding this issue. It has nothing to do with men being healthy or unhealthy, choosing to or not choosing to open up. Point blank, it is a social and behavioral problem that needs fundamental change. Story 29. I've had a negative experience every time I've opened up to a woman. They won't always mock you immediately, but it's common. They may also create fights, show contempt, spread malicious gossip, stop having sex, become cold, and so on in the months following your display of vulnerability. Women don't have empathy, compassion, or sympathy for men. Don't ever make the mistake of thinking they have the compassion for you that you have for them. They do not. She doesn't love you. She loves what you can do for her. Story 30. Then again, I can sniff out the horrible ones from a mile. At some point in life, I hope you will realize that this is not primarily a question of gender or society, but of personality. If you want kindness, choose kind people. Story 31. As soon as they realize it is their fault, they do not want to hear about it. They want to comfort you because of other issues, not be forced to change themselves if they care about your feelings. Story 32. Yes. Then they get upset when you don't open up anymore. I've had great partners and awful ones. You learn about boundaries with the awful ones, but don't let them influence the great ones. Story 33. Not that I remember, which is not to say that it never happened. But I'll be damned if I'm going to let someone who would do that live in my head. That's my biggest gripe with a lot of you guys who are in the never show emotion to a woman ever camp. I get that you've been hurt and that shouldn't have happened. But why would you let one of the worst people you've ever met not only continue to live in your head but dictate to you how you will live and express yourself going forward? Story 34. Frustrating at best. Current girlfriend and others before her ask for me to open up and express how I feel about things. Guaranteed argument the moment I express how I feel about anything. If I explain how anything makes me feel, my feelings are not considered or validated. Rather, I am met with an argument about how I'm not allowed to feel this way. I've come to realize that discussing feelings with a woman is completely pointless.